Hi, I'm Alice Kim. I'm a co-founder of Chicago Torture Justice Memorials. I also organize with the Prison Neighborhood Arts Project. It's really a pleasure to be in conversation with the two of you this morning, Max and Raina. You two really have been at the forefront of struggles for justice, freedom, and human rights here in Chicago. So really looking forward to this conversation. Just to get us started, can you tell us a little bit about how you became political, how you got involved in activism?
Yeah, I can start.
Sure.
Well, good morning. My name is Reina Wences. I'm a community organizer with OCAD, Organized Communities Against Deportations. I started organizing at the age of 18 after graduating from high school. At the time, I was an undocumented person. I did not have papers, and going to school was a struggle. And so I was trying to figure out how to finish my education, and it coincided with a campaign for one of my classmates who was fighting his deportation, and so that's kind of what opened up my eyes, right? I came into organizing as a way, in a way, to solve a problem that I had, a personal problem that I had, right? Access to education. But through that, I actually was able to get politicized, right? And getting engaged in deportation campaigns and fighting against deportations. And so I come into this work, I've been doing this for almost 8 years now, and a lot has changed. So I'm really excited to be able to share with both of you what that looks like, what that has looked like.
Thanks. Max?
What's up, y'all? My name is Max Boykin. I'm a member of Black Youth Project 100, a group of 18 to 35-year-old black folks fighting for black liberation through a black queer feminist lens, and we do that, and the reason we do it through a black queer feminist lens is to actually, people that tend to be most marginalized, and our new movement that we think about it a lot, we're not trying to be like movements of the past, but definitely learn from movements of the past. So within that, trying to make sure the people that are pushed to the margins, women, femme-identified folks are definitely uplifted, queer-identified individuals, and also constantly educating ourselves through political education to make sure that we understand the importance of making sure that people are put in, especially people that are pushed to the margins. So within that, and we want to make sure that the liberation for all black people, because we do actually mean that the liberation for black folks does mean liberation for all of us. And within that, so a big thing that I continue to think through is how I started within my organizing journey. My family's actually from Montgomery and Selma, Alabama. I was taught, from a very young age about the civil rights movement. My dad can tell me very real things from the Edmund Pettus Bridge at a very young age. So that was always something that was brought into me. But my own individual, activism would say starts in like two places. One, when I was in school, I was at the Naval Academy, and one of the things we had to fight for, or was being brought up, was when they were trying to get rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And when that was being pushed, that was something that there was a lot of pushback, especially from white cisgender men, right, who thought it wasn't okay for people to be open about who they are. And I remember just speaking up one time and really saying this is a civil rights issue, and I don't know why everyone was having such pushback around this. Also because we know there are queer identified people that are definitely within our school and within the military ranks, and I think they have the right to be open as who they are as anyone else does. And then the next time I think really was Troy Davis, when I went to school down in Savannah State. Was the next time I really got connected to something, and seeing the injustice of a man being sentenced to death for wrongdoing and having a totally missed trial. And also seeing the problems within the state of not actually doing enough. The state isn't the federal government, the state government just wanting to see black people death, right? Within that, I started organizing local campaigns in Savannah, then in Virginia, including the president's race, governor's race there. And then I ended up I was really done with the Democratic Party. I didn't want nothing to do with them because I had seen how they had failed my people. Specifically in trying to get Medicaid expansion passed in the state of Virginia. when I came to Chicago, actually, to make sure that people had continued access to health insurance, and really pushing for that. And I moved to Chicago for the first time. It was my first time in the Midwest. It was about 4 years ago. And during that first summer that I was here, I actually moved here in the winter. It was really cold. But
It's cold here.
yeah. But one of the things that in that summer that I met with BYP100, and they were organizing. We were actually in Inglewood at the time, and at the Residential Association of Greater Inglewood Rage, and we got a chance to. I was like, this is something that I was dreamed of, right? I had studied and seen what happened with Dream Defenders down in Florida. I wanted a black organizing space definitely for a long time, because in the organizing I had done, and many times I was the only black person trying to organize a black community that was divested from on many levels. So within that, seeing this beautiful thing of 18 and 35-year-old black folks that were doing things that I had never even heard of. At that time, I'd never even heard of a black queer feminist lens. Having that chance to really move into that work was really beautiful, and I've been with them ever since like 2014. So it's been, as you say, a beautiful struggle, and continue working on many different campaigns, such as right now Expanded Sanctuary, Decriminalize Black, The Grass Gap, Buy Anita, and a number of other campaigns we've been able to work on.
Can I back up just a little bit and ask you, when you say black organizing from a black queer feminist lens, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so when we talk about a black queer feminist lens, many movements of the past we have seen where that charismatic male leader is the person that is the voice, and always glorified in many places, and without actually tackling things such as patriarchy, tackling heteronormative ways, right? We fight against all those tropes, right? Like we're trying to fight back against patriarchy. We're fighting back against everything being taught in a very heteronormative lens, fighting against transphobia and homophobia, and making sure that, like, hey folks, what are we doing to make sure that folks that live in all those intersections of different identities are actually uplifted in our spaces, right? And that means making sure that we uplift the leadership of black queer women, femme-identified individuals, and all those different things, but also making sure that we are working to undo patriarchy within our space, but also within our community.
Great, thanks. A queer politic also informed the undocumented Coming Out of the Shadows campaign. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the origins of that and your involvement, really, I think, as a pioneer in kind of bringing that struggle forward.
Of course. Yeah, so when I got involved in 2009, it was my first semester at UIC, and I had already come out of the closet in a way, right? I was open about my sexuality, and I hadn't shared being out about being undocumented with a lot of people. So upon meeting other young people that were also organizing against deportations, we kind of realized that a lot of us were queer, and a lot of the people also were women, right? And so it was queer women, and I remember we were, it was the winter of 2009, and we had just had a victory with stopping the deportation of this classmate that I spoke about previously. So that was great, right? But we were thinking about, like, well, let's capitalize on this, right? Like, what can we do to share this and show that when we come out and we organize and we're open and share our stories, that we can actually change the narrative, right? And so we started talking about, well, we came out of the closet already, like, right? And at the time, I remember, I think the movie Harvey Milk, or Milk had just come out.
Right.
And so we were just like sitting in the living room thinking, like, what's gonna be the next thing, right? Well, where do undocumented people come out of, And then we were like, well, we came out of the closet, the shadows, right? Because we're invisible, like we're, as undocumented people, although we exist, and undocumented people exist, the society invisibilizes an entire community, right, to the rest of society. And so for us, it was very important to also learn from the movements of the past, right? And in that vein, right, coming out was a strategy for political change. And so we wanted to take some of that as well and implement it into what it is now, the undocumented movement, right? Especially, and it was very important for us to take that step and reclaim a space that wasn't given for us because of the invisibility of the community. Because at the time, and even now, there have been many conversations about immigration policy that have excluded people that are directly impacted. And so when I hear Max talking about, the queer lens, the queer feminist lens, and uplifting people that are in the margins, like that's actually also what informs some of the work that we do, right? The people that are directly impacted and that are being affected by immigration policies, detention, deportations, that they're the ones carrying this. And so the first step for us in 2009 was to reclaim that space, and so much has happened since then, but definitely it was something that we wanted to also make sure that people knew within the immigrant rights movement too, right, that there's queer people too, right? Because on one hand, we were trying to make our community visible to the rest of the public, and on the other hand, we were also trying to ensure that even within the immigrant rights community, people knew that there were queer people, LGBTQ people, right, and that they also needed to step up in a way and face that. So yeah.
Right. So it's interesting to note that the undocumented and coming out of the shadows campaign was really hatched in someone's living room. And I think that, many great ideas and activism are often hatched in, people's living rooms. And you're right, really, to say that so much has changed from then until now, and that campaign was so central to changing the landscape around immigration and undocumented people. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the work that OCAD is doing today, especially given all of the attacks that we're seeing on DACA.
Yeah, so when we started this campaign that it eventually became a movement, and it kind of had this effect that we didn't foresee at the beginning, and it's the undocumented unafraid, right? And actually another story, undocumented unafraid came up as an accident, actually. It was a friend of mine who was also in the organization and I were recording a story because we were trying to share more stories, and I put it out on social media and things like that. And so then he titled the name of the piece "Undocumented Unafraid," and then it became like a slogan, right? And then eventually kept adding "Undocumented Unafraid" and "Unapologetic," right? And that also has a reason why. But yeah, so the Immigrant Youth Justice League is actually the organization where I started. Eventually, by 2000, that was in 2009. By the end of 2012, we started noticing that secure communities, programs like Secure Communities 287G, which facilitate the collaboration between the police and ICE, were actually getting expanded, and we were starting to hear more deportation cases, more raids happening in the area. And so that kind of changed our focus as IJO, and we actually started a project which is called Organized Communities Against Deportation. Right. And this project ended up becoming the organization in the end, right? Within IJO, we were mostly youth-focused. The people in IJO were, in the Immigrant Youth Justice League, were between the ages of 18 and 25. With OCAD, since OCAD became an organization at the beginning of 2013, we've grown to be an organization of about 50 members, and now it's an intergenerational organization. The reason why is because OCAD mainly focuses on working with undocumented individuals that are facing deportation, whether they're in detention or outside of detention. And what that means is that oftentimes the contact that we have with people, it ends up being not just with the person that is in detention or facing deportation, but with the entire family, right? And so then the family comes in, and the work that we mostly focus on is fighting deportations case by case, but also trying to connect it and impact policy at the local or at the state level, but mostly locally. And we've been working with BYP100 in a lot of these campaigns, like the Expanding Sanctuary and the Dismantling the Gang database. And the reason why we do this is because we have seen how in the last since the Obama administration, there has been an increase in I guess, programs, systems, implementations, policies, that really do criminalize the immigrant community. and continue, and it's just an extension of the way that other communities have been criminalized, right?
Right,
And so now we're seeing this, and so that's why for as OCAD, when about 2 years ago, when we started talking about working outside of just the immigrant rights movement, what we wanted to was to also look and find those other organizations and people that were also had the similar mindset, right? And I think that's
Right.
the reason why we click so well with BYP100 and other organizations in the area, because yeah, I mean, it's we're at the forefront of really what is happening in the city with the Chicago Police Department, and also just with everything that's happening. So.
Right. Thanks, Rena. So Max, BYP100 really has been at the forefront of fighting police violence in Chicago, and I think really has reinvigorated the struggle and really provided a different way of fighting police violence. Can you mentioned a number of campaigns that BYP 100 has been involved in. Can you talk about some of that work?
Yeah, so Black Youth Project 100 started after 100 young activists and organizers from across the country came and met right outside of Chicago, coming out of the original Black Youth Project that Kathy Cohen had created. And they came together, and it just so happened that it was also the same weekend that the George Zimmerman verdict was coming out around killing Trayvon Martin. And out of that verdict was a lot of emotion. But one of the big things that I think really came out of that is like they found out we needed something at that time. We needed some type of organization that we could come to, that we could build with. And there, Black Youth Project 100 was formed. And much like OCAD, there was meetings in people's living rooms in order to start to build out this organization. And now we're at a point where we have 8 chapters across the country, still headquartered here in Chicago. We got DC, New York, the Bay Area, Detroit, Jackson, and New Orleans, and Durham, North Carolina. And then we're looking to expand into Milwaukee and Atlanta in the near future. So continue to do that work. But the first campaign that we ever did was Decriminalize Black, which was working around, and this was like after months of thinking about like what can we do, how do we think around these particular pieces. And I came in towards the end of the Decriminalize Black campaign after they had done lots of street teaming, lots of talking to folks, and one of the ways in which they did that, I saw them at that event at Rage in Inglewood. And one of the big things that we got out of that was, how do the police continue to criminalize us? How do they continue to have interaction with us? And criminalize Black communities, and we understand like the war on poverty, the war on drugs was really a war on Black people, brown people in this country, and to continue to incarcerate us, right? And we continue to see new methods in which they continued ways to continue to put us and lock us away in prisons or kill us. Within that work, GrassGap was found as like, well, they like a lot of the ways in which they are starting to arrest people is just marijuana arrests, having a little bit of marijuana on them, and working to decriminalize marijuana and making sure that folks couldn't arrest anymore, and even trying to get rid of the fines overall, right, which was able to get passed. Other things that we continue to do work with around Fight for 15, and understanding how elections impact us, but doing it in a different way that we've seen regularly, right? We don't want to continue to think about elections as these particular individuals to put up for election. No, it's about the plans, what are the things they're actually doing for our communities. And we've had 2 agendas come out, the agenda to keep us safe and then the agenda to build Black futures, which the agenda to build Black futures came out in the beginning of 2016, and it was our economic agenda, because we know economics is tied into this work. On this, we had the Say Her Name campaign, because Rekia Boyd was killed here in Chicago, and with a lot less fanfare, because this happened in 2012, right? Was killed by police officer Dante Servant on the west side. And to make sure that that police officer was fired, no longer was going to get a pension here in the city of Chicago. He did end up resigning after about over a year of actions and continued putting pressure on IPRA, and then eventually making it so they had to get rid of IPRA. But we also do know, and any times that we think about these strategies that we continue to fight back against folks, they're going to find new things against us, right? And you know, the changing of IPRA to COPA in the city, right? And continue to put pressure on them to take away how much money they actually spend on police. We spend 40% of the city's budget on policing, right? That's ridiculous when we have things such as mental health, things as education that's not properly funded, and all these other different things that could be properly funded, but we spend so much on policing that doesn't actually keep our community safe. And so most recently, working on the Expanded Sanctuary campaign with Organized Communities Against Deportation and with Mahinte to actually work to make this this beautiful new thing of like, what does it mean to really make our community safe? And that actually means investing in the education, the mental health services, and the other things and jobs that folks need in those communities, and less money on actual sending more money in policing, right? And that's something that even goes into the No Cop Academy that working with the Sada's Daughters and many other organizations across the city to make it so that we don't need $95 million for police. We actually need that money for everything else instead of just cutting these schools that they're doing right now, right? So things like that is like thinking about where are these funds actually going to, and continue thinking through that. And as we continue to think through that, back in 2015 when we started working with Organized Communities Against Deportation to shut down the International Association of Chief of Police, and then continue to work on Laquan McDonald and pulling out the information, having the Buy Anita campaign to get rid of Anita Alvarez, and continue to put pressure on the city, on the state, to put out actual policies that are actually here for Black and brown folks. And the Expanded Sanctuary newest campaign that we're working on is to get rid of the gang database. We've seen how that that's worked in ways to deport folks, that's worked to continue to criminalize folks, keep people from getting jobs, all these different things. So the way in which we want to make sure is that we put money into, we take the money actually out of how much we spend on keeping this gang database, which is a national thing, but it's particularly bad in the city of Chicago with how the CPD works with ICE, works with Homeland Security, working on the county level to make sure that we're deporting people, incarcerating folks, again, keeping them away from jobs, and using this as a scare tactic for students, right? All these different things is like dismantling this gang database as it is now, and actually, again, siphoning out those funds to actually use for things that actually help people get jobs, get the mental health services that they need, and make sure that we have properly funded schools.
Yeah, can I just add about the gang database too, and the work that we're doing in conjunction, that it actually, it's for us as OCAD this year, we've had to deal, and a lot of communities have to deal with a lot of attacks from the federal administration. So one of the ways that we have seen this year is to come back to do local work, right? From the federal government, we're only expecting the worst, as we have seen, not just with words, but with actions. I mean, just this year, Trump basically made any undocumented person priority for deportation, right? And so that's a big thing. He just in the last, since he took office, he took away the temporary protected status for 3 countries, and it's expected that there will be more added to that, which basically increases the amount of people that will be without status starting next year, right? And will probably be a priority for deportation as well. And so for us, it's very important to also come back to do local work and really fight against this rhetoric that Chicago is a sanctuary city, because we're not a sanctuary city. Right. We're not a sanctuary city where cops are getting away with killing Black folks. We're not a sanctuary city when cops are using the gang database to collaborate with ICE. So for us, it's very important to not just be part of the trying to change the narrative at the federal level with working with Mi Gente and other national organizations, but it's also about coming back and holding like the people that we have now here accountable for what they're doing or not doing.
I think we just have a couple minutes left, so with those last minutes, I just want to ask you both to share what is it that people can do to get involved in the work that y'all are doing.
Yeah, I think for OCAD, we have bi-monthly meetings every first and third Saturday of the month in Pilsen. So just follow us on Facebook. That's actually the best way to know what we're what we're doing. We often have press conferences or actions, but really send us an email, send us a message. We're volunteer led, an organization that is volunteer led. So we try to keep up with communication as much as we can.
Okay.
Yeah, again, hit us up on social media, our Twitter, but also we're starting to do some more community events in the Woodlawn area around this campaign that we're kicking off to honor her labor. And if you're interested in any of all these things and everything that we're working on, this amazing work that's going on in Chicago, you have the Resist, Reimagine, Rebuild Coalition, R3.
Right.
Check
Yes.
them out. Also,
Can
having
you just say a word about the Freedom Cities Initiative?
Yeah, so the Freedom Cities Initiative, which is a collection of a number of different campaigns, including the Expanded Sanctuary, Together We Rise, that is led by SEU, the Poor People's Campaign, the Reparations Campaign that Reparations at University of Chicago is working on, and many others, including different groups, and there's over 32 organizations that are part of the R3 Coalition, working to create a city that is free, and to continue to educate ourselves on what does it actually mean, and get the input of the community on what it means to truly be free. And that's what we truly want to think about, and that freedom and safety are not these separate issues. You can be free, and for our communities to be free, we also must have a safety, and safety means investing in the institutions that we actually need to survive.
That's great. Okay. Any other last words?
Just, I think for if people want to get involved with OCAD or just wondering like what's next, seeing us, all the stuff that's happening with immigration, to just hit us up again on social media, but to also not just take what is on the news as the truth 100%, because there's a lot of stuff happening behind closed doors. So hit up people that are directly involved, because they probably have another interpretation of what's happening.
Okay.
Support local groups, that's all. Yeah.
Okay, you two are amazing. Thank
you.
you for your brilliance, your courage, your commitment. Thanks.
Thank you.